Justice is what they want. Justice for having their homes destroyed, families murdered, and for the torture and rape of their people, they say, by the military in Myanmar. For now, they wait at a camp on the Bangladesh border with nowhere else to go. This delegation from the United Nations Security Council, who arrived at the camp today, could provide a glimmer of hope.
So we demand to take the HND criminals to the ICC court. Also we demand to ask for the losses, compensate on our losses.
They tortured so many women. The United Nations and other countries must give us justice, otherwise we will not go back.
The coastal town where the Rohingya camp is located is at great risk. Cox's Bazar floods frequently and the monsoon season is imminent. 700,000 refugees live here in already squalid conditions. But before they return, these Muslim refugees want citizenship in the country they've called home for centuries, something that's been denied to them by the government in the Buddhist majority nation. They're considered illegal immigrants.
We must get a nationality. We must be guaranteed our human rights. Without these guarantees, it is not possible for us to go back.
The government in Myanmar denies ethnic cleansing, saying its operations were a legitimate response to attacks on security forces by Rohingya insurgents. It now faces international pressure.
We would like to hear from the government of Myanmar how it wishes to work with the international community.
The UN group is due to meet with the Bangladesh Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina and Myanmar's de facto leader Aung San Suu Kyi. Both have agreed to complete a voluntary repatriation of the refugees within 2 years. The UN want to help speed up that process before the rain begins. But getting these refugees back to the place they call home quickly, with citizenship and the justice they're calling for, seems more of a hope than a possibility.
Well, as you just saw in that report, the UK ambassador to the UN, Karen Pierce, is part of the Security Council delegation touring Rohingya camps. I spoke to her earlier from Bangladesh over video phone and asked about the refugees she'd met today.
I met a lot of the women and girls and children there, some of whom had been gang raped, some of whom had seen their fathers and husbands killed in front of them. One small girl, aged about 12, came up to me and started crying and threw her arms around me. She was one of 9 children, and she had seen her parents killed in front of her, and she was looking after her younger brothers and sisters with her grandmother. And I think that's the sort of thing that's obviously very moving, but it's very sobering, and it's a reminder that we really do need to redouble our efforts to try and find a way forward for them.
So what kind of things would you like the international community to do now? Why it feels very much as if they've been quite slow to mobilise. Would you share that view or not?
I don't think the campaign or the plea for the money, the appeal has had as much of a response as the UN would ideally like. I think it's the funding is in shortfall.
Be frank with me, why do you think that there hasn't been such a large response as you would like from the international community?
I wouldn't like to say, to be honest. These things are very difficult. There are a lot of appeals going on right across the world. Sadly, there are a lot of refugee and other situations, particularly in Syria, as we know. I don't think it's that people aren't concerned about the Rohingya. I think possibly it's just that they haven't got round, perhaps, to giving the funding yet.
I mean, what many of the refugees are saying is that they want to go home. How can the UN give them the protection to do that?
Well, it critically depends on the authorities in Myanmar working with the UN to create the conditions on the ground so that the refugees can go home safely, they can live securely, their human rights will be protected, and that they have livelihoods. Sadly, these things are never easy, but I think the next step would be for the Myanmar authorities to work out a plan with the United Nations.
But do you have any confidence or any trust in the Myanmar authorities to do that when the UN, for example, has described the crackdown by the security forces of that country as ethnic cleansing?
Well, we'll go there tomorrow. We'll go to Myanmar tomorrow. We'll see Aung San Suu Kyi. We will talk through with her what we've seen in Bangladesh today.
Some describe her, after what's happened, as a war criminal. Would you share that view or not?
Well, appellations like that, indictments, they're for a proper court to decide. They're not for me to decide. I think it is true that some appalling human rights violations and abuses have taken place against the Rohingya in Myanmar. And from our perspective, accountability and proper investigations into that needs to be part of creating the right conditions so refugees can go home safely.